Welcome to our session. I'm really delighted you're here with me today. My name is Dr. James Norrie. I'm a professor of cybersecurity here at York College, Pennsylvania, and I am going to lead you through a little discussion, and then we're going to have an opportunity to have what I hope will be a really enlightening conversation, discussion, and some questions from you about what's really going on and what the Russians are really doing to us. So let's dive into the content, because we have a lot to talk about, because Russia frequently makes the news. So let's first of all see whether you agree with me. An important hypothesis. I think cybersecurity has become a global plague. We're in a position now where a global attack happens every 30 seconds. For those of you who don't know what these are real-time maps. We call them heat maps in our business. And this particular map, to the left up here, the real-time cyber attacks, shows the origin of cyber attacks in real time and between which two countries. You may want to have a look at that because you'll notice, as the hypothesis of our presentation today points out, that a large number of those dots originate in a country called Russia. You also have a real-time botnet heat map. That shows you where servers or server farms have been taken over by cyber criminals and are being used for nefarious purposes. Again, another important problem, a global problem. So we really do have a lot to deal with, and by the way, their misery becomes your job security, as you're going to learn by the end of my presentation. So let's look a little at cybersecurity evolution, because it has happened in phases. So beginning right around 1996, a time when many of you were not yet born, from about 1996 through to the early 2000s, you had really a nuisance factor in cybersecurity. You didn't really have a lot of organized crime yet. It wasn't seen as a real opportunity for economic crime, and so you had nuisance. You had little hackers and crackers, often in mummies and daddies' basements, not the kids who were trying to become cybersecurity professionals, because many of them would end up in jail. However, what we did is have them seeking fame or infamy. They were doing this to get somebody else's attention. It was a nuisance. Very quickly through the early parts of 2000 and through really till about around 2015, that becomes an important date for you to remember. Right around there we had organized crime gangs like Carbonac. Now let me just tell you a little bit about Carbonac because we study them. They have about 800 employees. They're based in a former Soviet republic. They have people in psychology, sociology, computer science. They have accountants. They have a CEO. They have everything that a normal business would have. They take roughly $1 to $1.5 billion out of the US economy every single month. This is known as crime as a service. They have scaled online internet crime to the point where it is more profitable and has less consequence than almost any other form of crime around the world. And then we move to right around 2014, 2015 saw the emergence of essentially information warfare. You'll note that that date was exactly before the last presidential election, not the most recent one, but the one in 2016. This is really interesting because it has as its core aggression, disruption, and misinformation campaigns for nation-states who are seeking advantage of their national interests over American national interests. So we'll talk quite a bit about that last column. So that brings us current to today, when Russia frequently makes the news. And why they make the news is because they're one of the more dangerous nation-state actors in cybersecurity. Highly organized, well-funded, clearly very technically capable. They do a lot of damage to a lot of nations, not just including America, but America, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, you name it. If it's an established Western democracy, it is likely that Russia is targeting them. You also have some other folks, the former Eastern Bloc countries, which are home to many of the crime-as-a-service gangs we were talking about earlier. And then, of course, you have the Naughty Three, North Korea, Iran, and China, who have publicly avowed to be mortal enemies of the United States. In particular, you may want to go look at something called China 2025. Quite fascinating. It's a public plan up on a website. You can read it in English, that talks about dominating the political and economic landscape of the future. And it particularly mentions they will use any means, including theft online, to advance their national interests. They are not hiding the fact that they're attacking us. They are telling us how they're attacking us. Now you might ask why they're able to do that. Well, because we can't really prosecute them, can we? They have a right as a nation state to have their own laws and their own standards, and we may not agree with it. We don't have to agree with it, but I can assure you it is not going to be as easy as bringing a bunch of Chinese nationals over to the United States and putting them through a court process now, is it? So much of what we talk about in nation states is acknowledging the geopolitical realities of what we're doing. And one of the great things about York College is if you were to come here and study, as an example, cybersecurity, you're going to get a very important education, a general education about political science and geopolitics and about economics, as an example, topics that will really help you understand why this particular phenomenon happens around the world. Because not everybody operates with the same lens on what should be legal or proper, ethical or moral. So much of what you're going to get as an education in cybersecurity, at least here at York College, is going to be to broaden your horizons and diversify your thinking and have you understand cybersecurity as a geopolitical issue, something that happens around the world with a number of actors and states who don't share our values as a democracy. I also want to touch on this, a very dangerous cyber attack. Not yet publicly attributed to the Russians by the US government, although hinted at. However, it has been already substantiated by many private security companies in our business that SolarWinds was a Russian-inspired attack. And not only a Russian-inspired attack, but an incredibly successful attack. In fact, it will turn out to be probably one of the most dangerous cybersecurity attacks ever perpetuated globally, ever. Let me tell you why. 33,000 businesses around the world use SolarWinds to manage their IT assets. It's a classification of system called middleware. And middleware is vitally important to helping companies operate. Middleware also has direct access down into the kernel and operating system of any computer it's installed in, and also up to what we call, in the OSI model, something you'll learn about in cybersecurity, into the application layer. It essentially has the keys to the kingdom for any company that uses it. And the keys to the kingdom include access to any file in any directory in any particular way at any time. And SolarWinds was taken over by a Russian malware virus that allows it to be manipulated from the outside, a little bit like a game you might remember from your youth called whack-a-mole. And if you know much about whack-a-mole, every time we find the kernel of the virus and we think we've got it and we're just ready to take it out of the system, it disappears like magic. And it reappears someplace else. It is virtually impossible, without rebuilding systems from the ground up, to be assured that this particular virus is gone. It has infected millions and millions and millions of endpoints on systems ranging from government to healthcare to technology to defense to national security to banks. SolarWinds has established why cybersecurity is so vitally important to our future. Because this plague of crime, as it gets more complicated, I can assure you this is going to take peers in my business and future professionals like you. It is going to take us decades to understand how to fix these kinds of problems and avoid the consequences. Because the really bright minds, unfortunately, in many of those other nation states, including Russia, are aimed at creating more and more SolarWinds attacks. So we need really bright minds like you to come and help us with this problem, because we need to make sure that the next SolarWinds doesn't happen. Because once it's happened, it's too late. The damage has been done. So more than ever, I would say to you that we are at a point in time where we as a nation need really bright people to see this as the work they want to do in their life. Let me also tell you something else. As crime has become more successful, and particularly that crime as a service evolution we were talking about earlier, as you've seen us move from the dark basement hackers, as you see here over on the slide, to perhaps the more organized and substantially more effective theft of your personal information. Now, again, let me tell you a little bit about this. It's highly unlikely that any one of you sitting in these seats today, or any one of you contemplating coming to study at this great college, has not already been compromised. because your digital footprints are too big. You share information about yourself because you live in what we call a post-private world. And you live in a post-private world where you don't actually put much value on keeping most stuff private, including some stuff that really should remain private, but that's not the point of this lecture today. What is important is for you to know that the average cost of acquiring a complete fake ID online of an American citizen has fallen to about $20 US. And for that, I can buy your social security information, your banking information, your home address information, your date of birth. I can get more information about you that's necessary to do things, as an example, like steal your credit. Or try this. Parents, you might be watching this with your student. We could steal your home. Title fraud is one of the most important crimes going on right now, where somebody who's worked diligently all their lives to pay off their home, they finally don't have a mortgage. Their identity theft activity allows somebody to go, put a new mortgage on that home. You don't know it's happened. You haven't authorized it. There is no insurance that will save you from this. There is nothing that is going to stop this from happening. Somebody is going to put a mortgage on title, and you'll only become aware of it when in about 90 days, somebody calls you and says, "Oh, your mortgage is in arrears." And you say, "No, I paid it off." And they say, "Not the old one, the new one." The amount of personal misery that is wrought by cybersecurity on our elderly and on other citizens in this country breaks my heart. And it really is important for all of us to understand that the work we do as cybersecurity professionals to protect every single citizen in this country against that kind of harm is really important and meaningful work, and that increasingly, as we see crime being more successful, it's important we solve this problem before it hits somebody close to home for you. Now, I want to arc a little bit here away from the specifics of cybersecurity to this important question about the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is foundational to American democracy. We treasure it. It's something that constitutionally is super important to all of us, and it makes us very proud that we're in a country where, as individuals, we have liberty and freedom. We have not only the Fourth Amendment to protect us, and you'll learn what that is in a minute or two if you don't know, but we also protect free speech. We protect particularly the right of people to be able to express opposition to government without fear of consequence, and a whole bunch of other things that are the bedrock, the absolute foundation of our democracy. So there it is, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, and it goes on. The Fourth Amendment legally, because I might point out in addition to having degrees in business and computer engineering, I also have a law degree, but I don't practice law. That becomes really important for you to know. And for students who take my introductory cyber class or my law class, I'll even tell you some secret stuff about why I don't practice law. But the point here is that if you're a lawyer, you understand what this means. You can't, as law enforcement, just arrive without probable cause and do anything which jeopardizes your personal right to privacy. Now, if you're a loyal citizen to this country and somebody who cares about this country, this is a very good protection, one that you're entitled to as a citizen, one which you would never want to give up, and one which even I could agree with you should not be threatened. But what if you were a citizen who wasn't loyal? What if you were a citizen who perhaps had another intention? Somebody who was perhaps recruited online to a cause that was harmful to our national interests and perhaps to your own personal security. Because I think the real global war now is for us to begin to debate as a country the differences between individual liberty and collective security. And so when I think about cybersecurity as an issue, I don't really get caught up in the technology, as interesting as that is, because you can't solve a technology problem with more technology, can you? My hypothesis is not. In fact, my recent 6th book argues that exactly. It says, you can't assume that a problem that is being created by living in a post-private world that is technologically enabled will ever be solved except by humans. It is changing our behavior and our thought processes that matters. And this is an important one because suspicion of government is in the DNA of this country. But so is crime. And in particular, one crime really worries me, and it should worry you. And it certainly worries every politician and policymaker and member of law enforcement and national intelligence with a clearance. Because if you have a security clearance and you understand this problem from the inside out, it's terrifying. And it's terrifying because the likelihood is that for each person in this theater today, that you live potentially within about 50 miles of an American citizen who is either being suspected of or tracked as a domestic terrorist. Domestic terrorism is our biggest threat to national security. To being invaded from within. People who were born here, lived here, raised here, who are American citizens under the Constitution in the same way that all of us are. And I'm going to assume all of you are loyal citizens to this country. But that might be a naive assumption on my part. Because if you looked at the rates of radicalization of citizens, and particularly how very powerful the internet is at spreading disinformation and misinformation that can persuade loyal citizens of this country to attack it from within, then you understand really what cybersecurity is all about. Cybersecurity isn't keeping them out necessarily, because there is no definition of keeping them out, because cyberspace doesn't belong to anybody. It doesn't belong to the United States. It doesn't belong to China or Russia. It doesn't belong to anybody. And the fact that it operates with essentially no legal recourse, no legal consequences, there's no court that you can go to get your house back when the Russian crime gang stole it. So what do we do? The most important thing is for us to question. If we're going to live in this technologically sophisticated and interconnected world, how are we as a nation going to deal with these kinds of questions? We have to debate them and talk about them, reason our way through, contemplate what should stay the same and what should be different. And those are the kinds of questions we want to explore in the classrooms of York College, Pennsylvania with you when you come here. Because they are the questions that matter as future cybersecurity professionals. It's not a technology question, although that's important. There are social questions, political questions, psychological questions, economic questions. They are legal questions. They are deep questions. And I want to finish by saying, in an age when you, and particularly you and your generation, is exposed to more misinformation, we even have a name for it, don't we? Fake news. A label that began around 2015, right ahead of the 2016 election. And it carried all the way through the last administration, into our last election, and it will carry on past this administration into our next elections. And why? Because many states don't want to see us successfully prevail as a democracy, because we are a threat to them. Our existence as a functional democracy, as a leading light of democracy around the world, for that matter, is a threat to people who don't believe democracy should be the system of choice. And they're perfectly clear that they're going to use any means they can to disrupt it, to challenge it, and to make it look like it can't successfully run the largest economy in the world. And if you were Russia, or China, or North Korea, that's the conclusion you want the rest of the world to come to. So this is not absolutely a political question. I am not here to take sides politically. I don't particularly care, because I will tell you, all parties engage in forms of manipulation of information, and all you have to do is ask my colleagues in political science about that to recognize what that is about. I'm more curious about what it is I can do to help citizens spot it, so they can make their own choices about what information they believe and trust and why. Because if we can't fix this problem, we won't have to worry too much about the rest of the problems. So what are the implications of this lecture? Well, pretty simple. Cybersecurity, in my view, is becoming a modern social and economic plague. You saw the heat maps. You know it's a problem. You need only look at the crime statistics to also realize that in an age of COVID-19, anxiety has increased Threats have increased. We're all feeling a little bit anxious. We're all stuck at home, working from home, studying from home. It's different. So we know it's a problem. And that the rates of crime online are rising faster than the drop in crime offline, making it, in fact, a more criminal, not less criminal problem. And unfortunately, as I said, this global misery creates future job security for you and for me. I will tell you right now, in the greater DC area alone, there are 11,000 open cybersecurity positions. Across the nation, there are millions of open positions. In fact, in recent surveys of highly paid professional jobs, cybersecurity and cybersecurity-related fields will hit those lists in positions 1, 2, or 3 every single time. They are secure, high-paying jobs because the costs and consequences of cybercrime are awfully expensive. So they need all the talent they can get to fight this problem. And you can be part of that. You can be part of this global solution. Economic incentive is not the only objective for hacks and attacks in cybersecurity. They have a geopolitical overlay. It's important for us to understand that and broaden our understanding of that. You can't solve a technology problem with just technology. You have to understand people, people's motivations, nations' motivations. What's it all about is the question we want to ask. And information literacy and critical thinking are terribly important skills. Skills I hope you've already started to learn in high school, but if you didn't, I certainly tell you we will make sure you learn them here. And finally, we must openly debate personal freedom versus national security. That is the defining issue of your generation. Many of us will die not having fixed this problem. We will not have enough time to solve its intricacies, but you can. You can start now. You can join this profession. You can join this tribe of people who really describe the problem in different terms and help all societies, not just our country, come to grips with this so that we can better this world. So thank you very much for being here today, and we'll now move to your questions and discussions, which I anticipate will be lively. I hope you really have a perspective on this that I can't wait to hear. Thank you for being here today.